My name is Father Michael Sullivan. I'm 75 years old and I've been hearing confessions for 50 years. In all that time, I've developed a certain composure, a professional distance. I've heard murders, I've heard affairs, I've heard confessions that would make your blood run cold, and I've listened to all of them without interruption, without judgment. That's my role. But 3 weeks ago, a man came to this booth and told me something so disturbing, so fundamentally wrong, that I had to stop him halfway through. I actually interrupted a confession, something I've never done in 50 years. His name was Richard. He was 52 years old, a successful surgeon, and what he confessed wasn't technically illegal, wasn't violence, wasn't theft. But it was one of the most morally reprehensible things I've ever heard. Because Richard didn't just hurt his brother, he orchestrated his brother's complete destruction methodically over years. And he did it at the one moment when his brother needed him most, at their father's funeral. Richard sat down in this booth, and the first thing he said was,
"Father, I need to confess something about my brother, about what I did when he was at his lowest, when he trusted me completely."
What he told me over the next hour made me question how well we ever really know the people we call family. Because sometimes the person sleeping in the room next to yours growing up becomes the person who waits decades for the perfect moment to destroy you, and you never see it coming.
Father, I'm a surgeon. I've been practicing for 23 years. I'm very good at what I do. Precise, controlled, patient. Those same qualities that make me an excellent surgeon are the same qualities I used to destroy my brother. My younger brother, Daniel. He's 49 now. Growing up, people always said we were lucky to have each other. Two brothers, only 3 years apart, both smart, both successful. But Father, from the moment Daniel was born, I hated him. Not the kind of sibling rivalry that fades, not normal competition. I mean genuine, deep, consuming hatred. And I hid it perfectly for 49 years.
The way Richard said this, with absolutely no emotion, no remorse in his voice, just clinical, factual, like he was describing a surgical procedure. I asked him, "Richard, why? Why did you hate your brother?"
Because he took everything that should have been mine. I was 3 years old when Daniel was born, and the moment he arrived, I became invisible. Our parents, especially our mother, were obsessed with him. He was the baby, the cute one, the charming one. I was the serious older brother, the responsible one. Daniel could do no wrong. Everything he did was adorable. When I got straight A's, they said, "Good job, Richard." When Daniel got B's, they threw him a party. He's doing his best. He's so creative. When I won academic awards, they put them on the fridge for a week. When Daniel made the basketball team in high school, they went to every single game, wore his number, filmed everything. I went to medical school, became a surgeon, saved lives. Daniel became a high school teacher and coach. And you know what our parents said? "Daniel is doing such important work, shaping young minds. We're so proud of him." I performed a successful surgery on a 6-year-old's heart. Daniel helped his basketball team win a regional championship. Guess which one they talked about more at Thanksgiving? Father, I spent my entire life achieving, excelling, trying to earn what Daniel got automatically, and it was never enough. So yes, I hated him with every fiber of my being, but I never showed it, never once. I was the good older brother, supportive, proud of him. At his wedding, I was his best man. I gave a beautiful speech. When his children were born, I was the doting uncle. At every family gathering, I smiled, I congratulated him, I played the role perfectly. For decades, I waited, because I knew that eventually the perfect opportunity would come, and 3 years ago, it did.
The calculation in Richard's voice was chilling. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated over decades. What happened 3 years ago? I asked.
Our father died. Suddenly. Heart attack at 76. He was healthy, active. We thought we'd have another 10 years with him. And his death destroyed Daniel. See, Daniel and our father were close, really close. They talked every day, watched sports together. Daniel was Dad's favorite. Everyone knew it, including me. When Dad died, Daniel fell apart completely. He couldn't function, couldn't work, could barely speak at the funeral. His wife told me he cried every night for months. And Father, I saw my opportunity. Our father left an estate. Nothing huge. The house, some savings, maybe $800,000 total. In his will, he split everything evenly between Daniel and me, 50-50. The house was to be sold and the proceeds divided. But there was one provision. Dad had kept meticulous financial records, decades of documents, tax returns, investment papers, legal documents, all stored in his home office. The will stated that before the estate could be settled, all of these documents needed to be organized and filed properly. And Dad had appointed me as the executor. Me, the responsible older brother, the doctor, the one who could be trusted with important matters. The week after the funeral, Daniel asked me to handle everything. He said, "Richard, I can't deal with this right now. I can't even go into Dad's house without breaking down. Can you take care of it, please?" He was broken, Father, genuinely grieving, and he trusted me completely. I told him, of course, you focus on healing. I'll handle everything. And I did. I spent 3 months going through Dad's office, and I found something.
Richard paused here, and for the first time I heard something in his voice. Not remorse, satisfaction. What did you find? I asked, though I was starting to dread the answer.
I found documentation of loans. Over the years, our father had loaned Daniel money, quite a bit of money. $15,000 for Daniel's wedding, $30,000 when Daniel and his wife bought their first house, $25,000 when Daniel's son needed expensive medical treatment, $20,000 when Daniel's car died and he needed a new one. Over 15 years, Dad had loaned Daniel approximately $90,000, and Daniel had paid back maybe $20,000 of it. The rest was outstanding, unpaid. But here's the thing, Father. These weren't formal loans. There were no legal documents, no signed contracts. Just Dad's personal notes, his handwriting in a ledger. Loaned Daniel $15,000 for wedding, June 2008. Loaned Daniel $30,000 for house down payment, March 2012. All informal, all between a father and a son. And in several notes, Dad had written things like, "Daniel will pay back when he can," or "No rush on this." It was clear Dad didn't expect the money back on any schedule, maybe ever. He was helping his son, his favorite son. When I saw these documents, I had a choice. I could present them as informal family loans that Dad didn't expect to be repaid, or I could present them as legitimate debts owed to the estate. I chose the latter. I took those handwritten notes to our father's attorney. I presented them as official loans that needed to be repaid before the estate could be settled. The attorney looked at them and said, "Richard, these look informal. "Are you sure your father intended these to be repaid?" And I lied, Father. I said, "Absolutely. Dad and I discussed this before he died. He was very clear that Daniel needed to repay these loans. He was worried about it, actually. Worried Daniel was taking advantage of him." The attorney said, "Well, if that's what your father wanted, then legally these debts would need to be satisfied before distributing the estate." So it became official. Daniel owed the estate $70,000, and because the estate couldn't be settled until all debts were cleared, Daniel had two options: pay the $70,000 immediately, or his share of the inheritance would be reduced by $70,000. The house sold for $600,000, plus savings. The total estate was $800,000. Split evenly, we'd each get $400,000. But with the debt, Daniel's share would be $330,000, and mine would be $470,000. But Father, it was never about the money. It was about finally taking from him what he'd taken from me my entire life. Our father's favor, his trust, his legacy. I wanted Daniel to feel what I'd felt for 49 years, that no matter what you do, it's not enough. You're not enough. That the person who should love you unconditionally sees you as a burden, a disappointment. And it worked, Father. It destroyed him.
This is when I interrupted. I actually held up my hand and said, "Richard, stop." He looked at me, startled. In 50 years, I'd never interrupted a confession. "Richard," I said, "do you understand what you've done?" I explained to Richard something that should have been obvious. Those loans were gifts from a father to a son. His father had wanted to help Daniel, not burden him with debt. By twisting those informal notes into legal obligations, Richard had betrayed his father's memory. He'd used his father's generosity as a weapon against his brother, and he'd done it when Daniel was most vulnerable, most trusting. Richard listened to me, and then he said something that made my blood run cold.
"I know, Father. I know exactly what I did. And I'd do it again, because for the first time in my life, I won. Daniel looks at me differently now. The trust is gone. He didn't come to my son's graduation last year. We barely speak at family events. Our mother asks me all the time, 'What happened between you boys?' And I tell her, 'I don't know, Mom. I just enforced Dad's wishes. I guess Daniel resents me for it.' She feels sorry for me. She thinks Daniel is being ungrateful. I've finally become the good son, the responsible one who honored Dad's wishes, and Daniel is finally the one who disappointed our parents, even in death. Was it worth $70,000? Absolutely not. Was it worth 49 years of resentment? Yes, every single year.
I've been a priest for 50 years. I've heard terrible confessions, unforgivable things, but Richard's confession wasn't about seeking forgiveness. It was a victory lap. He came to confess not because he felt guilty, but because he wanted someone to know how perfectly he'd executed his revenge. I told him I couldn't give him absolution, not for this. Not when he felt no remorse, no intention to make it right. He stood up to leave, and before he did, he said one more thing.
"Father, there's one more thing I should tell you. I kept one of Dad's notes, one he wrote about Daniel. It said, 'Loaned Daniel $25,000 for grandson's medical bills. He offered to pay me back, but I told him absolutely not. Family doesn't charge family in times of crisis. I'm just grateful I can help." That note made it very clear those were gifts. I destroyed it, burned it. It would have proved the loans were informal, that Dad never intended repayment. But I destroyed the evidence, because this was never about honoring Dad's wishes. It was about making Daniel suffer, and it worked.
Richard left, and I sat in that confessional for a long time afterward. I've thought about that confession every day since, because Richard represents something terrifying. Someone who can smile at you for decades while plotting your destruction. Someone who waits patiently for the perfect moment when you're most vulnerable, and then strikes. Richard is a surgeon. He's precise. He's patient. And he used those same skills to perform surgery on his brother's life, to cut away Daniel's inheritance, his trust, his peace, all while maintaining the appearance of being the good brother. I'm sharing this with you because I need you to understand something. Some betrayals don't happen in moments of passion, of weakness, of jealousy. Some betrayals are calculated over decades. Some people carry resentment so deep, so carefully hidden, that you'll never know it's there until it's too late. Richard spent 49 years being the perfect older brother. And Daniel never suspected, never had any reason to. The people closest to you have the power to hurt you most, not just because they know you, but because you trust them. You don't see them coming. If there's someone in your life who you sense resents you, don't ignore it. If there's a sibling, a friend, a colleague who seems just a little too supportive, too perfect, pay attention. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. Sometimes they're just waiting for their moment. Richard got his moment at his father's funeral. Daniel's moment of deepest grief became Richard's moment of triumph. And Daniel will never know the truth. He'll spend the rest of his life thinking his father saw him as a burden, that he disappointed the one person he loved most, when in reality his father loved him unconditionally, and his brother destroyed that truth out of spite. This channel exists to share these confessions, these warnings. If this story disturbs you, good. It should. Subscribe. Turn on notifications, because there are people like Richard in the world, and the only defense is awareness. Be careful who you trust with your pain. Be careful who you trust with your vulnerability, because some people will use it against you. Richard waited 49 years. How long is someone waiting to hurt you? The clock is always ticking.